Hi, and welcome to Real Clear Fetish Talks Real Clear Play, a podcast that dives into sobriety and kink and everything in between. This week, we're going to the States and talking to Chipper. Hi, Chipper.
Hey,
How are you doing?
I'm swell. I'm doing great. And I have
Fant-
an excuse to wear leather. So,
well, yeah, any excuse really.
exactly.
And you do look very sharp today.
Thank you.
Fantastic.
As you.
This is the second time I've worn this shirt, and for anyone watching or listening, I'm wearing a leather tech check shirt, and it is leather. It's not cotton. It is leather. So yeah. So with every episode I do four standard questions at the start, and then we'll just see where the conversation goes.
Sounds good. I'm excited.
Fantastic. So the first question is names, pronouns, and title.
Name is Chipper, just Chipper. Pronouns are he, him. And title, as in former titles, as in what I call them or how I relate to myself.
That can
Uh,
be anything you think of, really.
Anything. Okay. So I'm just going to go through in leather world or title world. I was Northeast handler 2023 and international trainer 2024. I am a switch, though I lean more dominant. I am verse. I am sober. I am a lot of contradictions.
Well, you're a little bit like me. I flip-flop back and forth with different roles and so on, and people get surprised when I kind of point out it's like, well, if you call me boy, I will be putty in your hands.
Hmm.
And then I'm standing there flogging someone. So it's like,
Uh, I really relate to that. I think my energy comes off as very dominant, partially because of my aesthetics, and I tend to be relatively direct and not take a lot of crap. And so I think that energy, just people then relate to me as a dominant, even though I also enjoy being a submissive. And when I started King Play, it was as a submissive. And I do struggle sometimes with the balance of those things though, because it's like every daddy needs a daddy kind of thing. I find that I tend to focus a lot on my control, my handling, my dominance, and not as much to my sub side, which is at a detriment to, I think, my kink practice and my mental health sometimes. But I do keep some elements of that alive. Like for me, one of I did it this weekend. Like one of the things that I like, I'm a water sports guy. I love to drink from the tap, and it gets me into subspace like that. Like if
mm.
someone's like, I need someone to drink, and I will be on my knees immediately and ready to go. And so that's like a way that I've kind of kept my sub headspace easy and accessible throughout when I'm kind of carrying dominant energy more frequently.
Would that be your title? Easy and accessible.
I think a lot of people would think that's yeah, but also very particular. But yeah, easy and accessible. It's making me think of these queens that were like on Drag Race or whatever. I'm not going to say it, but they had like, this is so easy and so fun, was like their thing. And I've been really trying to embody that element. Like Chipper for me is not just like the name Chipper was from my first alpha. He gave me that name because I'm so enthusiastic. Like the name is like from the adjective,
Mm.
and so like I think that if I had to like say what a descriptor of who I am or a title, it'd be chipper, you
I
know.
really like that, and it's also like I want to use the word golden retriever energy. That's like the name you would give to someone with that kind of energy, and I really love that energy as well. So, next question, can you tell me a little bit about yourself? You already kind of did that, but can you explore it a little bit more for me?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, me, I love talking about me.
That's what this podcast is about.
Yeah, it's like what? Me, little alcoholic addict me? Let's Yeah, so that's such an open-ended question about me.
Just a little
I
short intro to yourself. That's it.
Okay, cool. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean I'm a Leatherman, I'm a handler. I'm a little neurospicy and a bit particular. I work too much and yeah, I don't know. I think I'm just like life's short, have a good time,
Hmm.
make an impact, make an impression, learn. I love learning new information. It's very Gemini of me, I think. Yeah. I don't know if that, yeah,
No,
I feel
that's
like there's less in that answer than the first.
no, this is perfect. We'll get there. We'll get there. That's fantastic. Third question, you kind of answered it already, but social drinker or completely clear-headed?
Completely nothing. Yeah, it's been coming up to about 7 years, but not quite yet. Depending on when this also goes live. But no alcohol, no drugs. I recently kind of put poppers back in the mix or solvents on occasion, but
Mm,
I had a lot of conversation with people around me around whether I was going to do that or not and what I felt like the line was for me.
yeah,
But outside of that, on occasion, it's yeah, nothing.
fantastic. And what is clear play to you and why is it important?
Well, yeah, that for me personally, it's about presence and my ability to be present. And that's if and because it's not just about substances. Like there's so many things that can make me not present, you know. So what clear play means to me is that all of that stuff is either being managed or handled or kind of on the shelf for the moment, and I can be present with myself and with whoever I'm playing with.
Hmm.
Uh, it's something that I've been in therapy for well over a decade. I kind of touched on being a little neurospicy. I have my own kind of collection of trauma along the way to being here. And I have to watch out for those things just as much as I have to watch out for substance use. I don't really consider them different. I just recorded a reel recently where I was talking about escapism. Like, when does the play become escapism versus like leaning more into who you are? And there are so many things like kink actually functioned like that for me for a while, right? Like it was for me to, it's just like another form of like, okay, if I'm not doing a substance, then I can lean into this thing like very addictively. And so for me, that's also not what I might call clear play, because I'm not my own needs are like or what I think are my needs are like superseding the moment.
It's interesting when you mentioned as like you can lead it into other things. And for me, I it's like when I talk to people about being sober and clear-headed and all that, I have periods in my recovery where I feel like I am mentally lapsing, not physically, but mentally. Kind of like not checking in with myself, not doing the things I need to do to keep myself in check, which if you don't can lead to physical relapse. So it's you kind of explain how I sometimes explain to people because you don't have to actually have the physical action of either drinking or doing drugs to at least mentally feel like you're relapsing in a way.
Yeah, emotional hangover, feeling isolated, lonely, those things can happen without me needing substances to do it. I carry me wherever I go, and that can sometimes be a problem, you know?
Yeah, that's for sure. If someone could just spend 24 hours in my head, I think they would get an experience. I think they would rather go on 30 roller coasters instead.
Yeah, I feel like that's something I'm really grateful for. This is something I actually learned within the kink community, particularly through title holding, is like kind of being really visible. And this also extends to like the work I do online and just being a very visible person is it was extremely hard for me at first to do that. Really felt like I was going to break under pressure of being witnessed too much and that I'd
Mm,
be held to a standard that I could not maintain, where I couldn't maintain sense of self, and I also couldn't maintain the service that I was here to do, and keep my eyes on like how is this helping me in my own journey. And yeah, that experience really strengthened me a lot in what I have to care for, who I have to check in with. I'm grateful that I have like sober community as well as kink community because they kind of feed different things.
mm,
Think about people who like have a very tight group, but it's like there's nowhere else to go outside of that. I'm grateful for the multitude of communities I get to tap into. Because during when I kind of started coming out more in the scene, I was so happy that I had friends and 12-step recovery and other structures there that I can like navigate this experience because my kink experience also a lot of things I explored were when I was like deep in using and chemsex and a whole bunch of other things. And so I had to like unpack so much of that. And so yeah, I'm a little less cuckoo bananas, I think, but I don't think any of my partners would agree with that. I feel like the roller coaster is less like and more like yeah. You know?
It's more the kids' ride now, yeah,
Yeah,
for
exactly.
sure. I've like you mentioned your neurospiciness, and one of the things with addiction, it taps into people with neurospiciness. I'm ADHD. I don't want to say I'm undiagnosed autistic because it's not, as the doctor said, it's not severe enough to diagnose on the NHS. So it is like, but it's there, and definitely the drugs were that was me coping with that. So now that I don't have that, I kind of just have to navigate my head slightly differently. So yes, I'm less crazy off crystal meth, but I'm still crazy in other ways. And that's fine. And you just have to learn to navigate those kind of things.
Totally. Well, that was one of the hardest pills for me to swallow, actually, in my early recovery, was like, because for so many years, I was just like, oh my God, all this kind of like wacky play is making me this way. And then I got sober and I realized like a year later, like, oh no, this is just me. That was like a whole nother journey to go through.
Are you late diagnosed, so you weren't aware of your neurospiciness before you became sober?
Yeah, I to some degree. So I started working with my therapist about 11 years ago, and that was my first attempt at like connecting to sobriety because I had no concept of like what sobriety looked like. My mom is active, and that's her own story and journey. And I come from a place where people just didn't talk about alcoholism or addiction, except, you know, the kind of social stigmas that are associated with them, but it was very prevalent around me. And so the thought never occurred to me to like go to rehab or 12 step or anything like that. Like it just didn't. I was just like so deep in my little world. And so I reached out to like a therapist, I was in school at the time and I reached out to like the mental health office and they were like, we can't really handle you. You need to go to someone else. And that's when I started to see a lot of what I thought I'd grown up just thinking was normal wasn't. And so I unpack a bit of that. Like I've learned, I was just talking to one of my partners about this the other day. Like last night we were talking about like superstition versus kind of like giving object magical properties. Because as a kid, I grew up like very much everything was magical property to me, which means like I would like this glass of water has feelings. And I would have to like take it into consideration and be like, it has to be placed right there. And if it wasn't placed right there, I would have like a nervous breakdown. And it just wasn't it was so hard. And it helped me survive as a kid, you know, like in
Mm.
a way, because I was so closed off and I really wasn't expressive. I was very painfully shy. And so I just kind of like made a world around me. And even when I talk about like my like sober journey, I think my first like addiction is to that kind of like fantasy building that I did as a child. And so for me, like I attached to numbers and I didn't really think about like my logic brain like worked, like functioned really high, even in a chaotic environment. I didn't understand social cues. I would just like talk ad nauseum at people when I got older, and I just couldn't understand negotiating with people. It was painful, and I felt like so isolated in that experience. But it wasn't until, yeah, so I started that work a little bit before I got sober. And then it was kind of like aligning, like within the years of getting sober, and I was able to really pull back and see the patterns of my life and the tools I've learned. Because it was my friends in recovery who were like, I would describe a little bit of what I just described here and be like, yeah, but I've learned all sorts of tools. I don't have that problem today because I now know, like when I walk into a room, I do this, I do this, I do this, I think this, I prepare this, I do this. And they're like, yeah, neurotypical people don't do that. You know? And I was like, whatever. But
Oh,
it,
I had the situation where explaining to my ex, it's like, so you don't obsess over a text message for 2 weeks? And it's like, no, you don't. I was just like, oh, I thought everyone did this.
Yeah, well, like meeting someone and having like, yeah, just building a fantasy world, you know, around it, and just it was like, oh, I didn't relate to it as unwell. I just related to it as a part of what my experience was. Yeah, so I did get to like sobriety helped me see that so much more clearly. And it
Mm,
also helped see the ways that my survival mechanisms that I use that could help me and the ones that I had to like abandon. And that was like such a game changer for me. I would never have been able to do the kind of work I do today if it wasn't for me moving through my recovery journey the way I did. That's definitely for sure.
I think sometimes when, especially with the kind of work we do on ourselves in, and I don't want to sound like an ass, but like when you do recovery, you do a lot of work on yourself, like therapy and so on, and you kind of look at people around you sometimes, people who don't have addiction issues, people who are not neurospicy, and you kind of like looking at them and some of the stuff they're going through, just like, if you just went to therapy though, you might feel better. But
Mhm.
because it's not for us to kind of like, it's their journey to discover these things. Because like telling someone you should go to therapy can be a bit aggressive, but it is sometimes. It's like I also now constantly diagnose people where I'm just like, are you sure you're not on the spectrum somehow or somehow? It's just like you're doing these things and you keep doing them. There is a pattern here, but it's just like you can't do that with everyone you meet in your life.
No, you can't. And that's something I had to learn. I still, like, on occasion, I'll be like, I'm about to give you some unsolicited advice, and I understand that you probably won't take it, but I just have to say this.
Yeah.
The only people who I'm very close with who have, like, it's not a new problem, like, it's coming up over and over and over, and they're just, like, not getting breakthrough. Yeah, but it's one of the reasons, like, even in my own content, and when it comes to how I view education, I use myself. Like it's very rare I talk about other people or other experiences because I know my own journey. I know I can speak to it. It doesn't offend anyone else if I'm talking about, well, I mean, people can get offended by whatever they want to get offended by, but at least it's coming from a place where I don't have to manipulate or take responsibility for anyone else's body or experience. And that can sometimes be viewed as egocentric. I think some people who are not my fans would be like, Chipper's always talking about his experiences, but it's out of a form of respect, actually. Like, to not pull in people who have not consented to be talked about or situations that it was really, I don't have any authority or it's not my story to tell. And so I utilize my own experience as the place in which I speak from most often. And I find that to be helpful and relatable and useful for a lot of people because a part of like I think both with leadership and in recovery and an educator in the way I've chosen to do it online and social media is that people need like an object to like the people who like also don't like me, like that's fine. Like it's good. Like they can put their frustration onto me or the version of me they think they know. And that's still like doing a service. People just kind of need some kind of object, some kind of thing to like project or to be able to see and reflect back to them what their own
Hmm.
experience is.
At what point did you decide to like, I'm gonna do these advice videos on Instagram? Or I can't remember. Are you on TikTok as well?
I am on TikTok, but I it's not my primary space. I'm a millennial, so Instagram is my primary space.
That's where we stick.
I feel like the boomers and Xers are like Facebook, and then like Instagram is very millennial friendly, and then TikTok is like very Gen Z. I find TikTok stressful, to be honest. Like I when it turns on, there's someone like immediately doing a video at me. I just can't. I get overwhelmed really easily.
For me,
Uh,
it's TikTok has just turned into TV shop. It's just like I want to sell you something, sell, sell, sell. But yeah, it's what it is. So where did you get to point where it's like, okay, I'm gonna do these information videos. I'm gonna talk about my sobriety. I'm gonna talk about my experiences. When did you make that choice to do? Because of course I made a choice to do this.
uh,
So what brought you to that? Actually, I'm gonna do this.
There were a few factors that happened. One of the big ones was winning international trainer. It's not as big of a contest as IML or MIR, and there's not as much funding to go to places and do things. But Puppy World is huge and it's
Mm.
exploded over the past decade. And so there's like a discrepancy between like what the organization is able to provide support wise and what the need is in the world. I quickly realized I was not going to be able to afford to attend all the things that I would like to have attended. And I've also been very critical of titles. Like though I've held two titles, I also understand the critique of titles And I was like, what does international mean? Like, what does this title mean to anyone? And how can I do any work or be of service in any way that's actually meaningful, that is different from the kind of personal one-on-one experiences, which travel helps, you know? But even when I travel or go to events, it's not like I'm able to have deep, meaningful connections to that many people. Like you
Mm.
might get to see someone and have a brief moment of contact, and there might be a few occasions where you get to really get in depth and feel like a bond and feel like you helped someone. But it's actually very rare, I think, that you have that kind of meaningful, moving experience, other than being a visible representative of a community, which has significance. And I don't want to downplay that. I was like, the only way I can do this is via the internet. Like the internet is the place that I can be, it can hit anyone anywhere that has the internet access. And so that was the motivator for me to start doing more content online. And I have to thank my puppy Rufus, who also does content creation. And he knew I was having this experience. And he was like, you are so charismatic. You have so much knowledge. You are so smart. Like, can I help you make this a reality?
Mm.
So he's like my partner in this journey. He does my editing and a lot of like we brainstorm together, and a lot of the subjects of the videos are about our dynamic in relation to my other partners, and so it just so happened that like what I wanted to do and the tools to make it happen kind of fell around the same time. And so I took advantage of that opportunity, and it has just evolved and grown, you know, since then, and it's continuing to do so.
I do find like with because your themes are so widespread, it's some videos I connect with and some I don't, and that's the beauty of information videos is it's not every episode of what's the safe word I watch. If the
Mhm.
subject matter is relevant to me, I'll watch it. And your videos are just really easily accessible and engaging, and I do commend you on that. You're very good on camera.
Oh, thank you. I'll take that. And just to speak to that a little bit, I view my what I do is very broad.
Mm,
I talk about recovery, I talk about relationships, I talk about sex, I talk about kink, I talk about, you know, like they're for me, they're all connected. Like
mm.
that's something that sobriety actually helped bring to focus for me, is that these things are not separate things. They're all a part of how do I show up in totality? You know, because if I just say there's an underlying philosophy of everything I do is integration, like how do we just like bring it all together? And it can be nuanced and reflect different things. And of course, I have to feed the beast. You know, like if I'm posting a video every day, not every video is going to be fantastic. Not every video is going to hit the same audience. Not all are intended to, but it's like to use like it's a little bit strategic even. Like sometimes I'll be like, people are interested in the recovery component. So I'll be like, oh, I'll make a few videos around recovery that could be helpful. And then I'll look at what I think is needed in addition to like what I'm going through in the moment, you know?
Yeah, it's experience and lived experience, and your day-to-day life will affect anything you do online. It's I've had points in my shows. It's like I don't really have anything to say. So what? How do I do an episode if I have nothing? If I have had no experiences to share of? So it's just I know internet and social media and so on, it can be so fatiguing. How do you manage to not get tired of doing it?
Yeah, then I have a very neurospicy puppy who is a good service pup and keeps me focused.
Can you send them my way and do my editing because I'm a one-man band?
Yeah, it would be really hard for me if I was doing this alone. Because I think there's a perception that because I am on the internet, that I enjoy being on the internet or that I utilize. And here's a little secret is that I actually don't consume much of anything on social media. I follow, I don't look at a lot of content. I don't consume much. Like my TikTok, I literally go on, post a video. Once it's posted, I leave. And I don't engage because I find it really stressful and really fatiguing. I find something that has been actually a blessing is the amount of hate that also comes your way on the internet. And it's taught me how to like just like let go of a lot of stuff, and not everyone's gonna get everything, and not everyone's the audience. And so the things that are hard have gotten easier as time has gone on. It was definitely very difficult at first. Again, that kind of like visibility. And that's I have new challenges now in that I what's become hard for me within this space is that I'm in New York in particular. I work at a sex club and I work at the Leatherman and I do my own business and I'm around. But if I go to a play space, it's very likely I'm going to run into people who follow my content and it can get kind of awkward. Like, no, I'm not their therapist. No, I'm not their coach or whatever, but I'm very aware that I'm witnessed a lot. There is one experience in particular where I was playing and like at least 15 people throughout the night like came up to me to want to talk about a video. And I was like, oh, this is like MySpace. Like I don't I
I'm
don't
I'm
not
I'm
MySpace,
kind
but
of
not the
off the clock at the moment.
yeah, exactly. I'm off the clock at the moment. And then people like messaged me later being like, oh, I saw you, whatever. And then I get in my head and I'm like, oh my God, are they going to critique the kind of play I'm having? Are they going to critique my methods? Are they going to critique, oh, well, Chipper did this one thing wrong that time? Are they going to critique who I find attractive and who I don't? Are they, like I start to worry about things that I've never had to think about before, really. And that's a little difficult for me, but it's also teaching me to be like, fuck it. Like I just have to like live my life as best I can. And I think being sober, there's no way I would handle any of this well if I wasn't sober. I mean, it would be a disaster. I have a lot of like repressed anger I'm working through. I have a lot of just unhealthy coping mechanisms that I've shelved that can easily come back out. And so staying grounded, remembering that this is something that I enjoy. Like I have to tell myself a lot of the times I get to do this, like this isn't something I have to do because if you put Chipper in a corner, Chipper will become a feral cat and like lash out. And that was so much of how I viewed my using when I was active. I didn't realize that I had options in it. Like my therapist would say that my parents sent me on an errand, and I followed that errand. My dad told me like years ago, like he was talking to my younger brother and I was there and he was like, well, I was already out and like an adult at this point, but he was like, well, all gay people are addicts, all gay people like have these problems. And it was something I grew up with, like this kind of internalization that, oh, okay, like, I'm of the generation that I was born in the mid 80s. And as I was very clear, I was queer from like a very young age. And I'm gonna be addicted to sex. I'm gonna be addicted to drugs. I'm gonna get AIDS. I'm gonna like this is what like my family and people around me were like the expectation of my
Mm.
experience. And so to like combat that and to like not just take someone else's narrative of my experience as valid or as true was like so much work that I did in recovery. And it's also like in this nuanced way through my education, like it's also me kind of shedding more and more of those like, so if someone watches my videos, so what? They can have an opinion, but I don't have to take their narrative as my narrative and I can just keep going. And to keep reminding that, yeah, I'm not forced into anything. I get to do all this really exciting, cool, fun stuff. And it's like a privilege.
Do you know what? I get so much joy out. I think the first couple of times when one approached me because they've watched something I've done online, didn't quite know what to do with it. I was just like, oh shit, there are actually people watching this, which is such a huge compliment. But I also, as a slightly socially awkward kind of person, I was like, I don't know. I don't give me a compliment. I don't know what to do with it. Um, but I think I've gotten better at it now. But you mentioned your titles. Can you, because I've been thinking about it. It's like we have puppy titles in Europe. We don't have handler titles. Not that I know of.
There are some. There are
I'm
some.
happy to be wrong.
Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
haven't been keeping my hand on the pulse, but can you tell me a little bit about your title, what that entails?
Yeah, totally. Handler trainer, a lot of people just switch the terms
Hmm.
each other. It is very niche and it is very nuanced. And I have a lot of thoughts and feelings around how people relate to handlers and trainers. I think one of the reasons it's viewed and or not completely understood. First of all, a trainer or handler is someone who trains or handles critters or pets, like puppies or kittens or whatever human
Hmm.
critters of any type. And for me, it's not my sole identity. Like I'm also like a leather man. I'm also submissive. I'm also like an impact junkie. I have other things
Let
going
me
on.
just get my flogger. One moment.
Oh, I have mine right over there.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, so it's not like a part of my singular identity, but it for me, what happened is I started out as a puppy when I entered the community because something that was very clear for me is I was always a kinkster, though I never really framed it like that for myself, even before I got sober. I used to go to the Eagle when I moved to New York pretty frequently. I definitely loved leather aesthetics. When I got into heavy crystal use, it was, the first time I was fisted, the first time I really started doing piss play, like started doing like kind of taboo role play scenes. And so I was doing all of this stuff, but it was completely removed from a sense of community.
Hmm.
Uh, there was a community in a way, and I have a little soapbox I stand on about how we as a broader kink, gay, queer community can do better, I think, with how we deal with people who are struggling with addiction, because the more we push people out, they're going to find people, but unfortunately, they're going to find people in the fringes. That was my experiences. The more I felt pushed out, the more I had in common with people who are not good actors, and that became my community because that's all I had access to.
Yeah.
But it's like, yeah, it was private and separate from what we consider, I think, the larger community. And when I got sober, I knew I wanted sex is really important to me, and I wanted to continue to explore. And I didn't want to. If I knew that if I prevented myself from like actually allowing myself to fulfill fantasy within my play world, that actually could be a hindrance to my own sobriety. And so it was important for me to do the kind of play I wanted, but I had to find new structures and new people and new community. And that's when I kind of entered into, the community that we're a part of, globally, or even like within New York or however specific or broad it was. And that entry point for me was pet play. And so I identified as a puppy at that time. I had an alpha, I joined a pack, I started doing a lot of events. That was my experience. I'm digressing from the question.
That's fine. That's fine. There's a little bit of background knowledge. That's okay.
I love giving like too much information. I could just like talk ad nauseum. Go as quickly as possible. My alpha had an accident. I ended up kind of stepping up more in my pack. I ended up stepping up more in the community. I ended up handling. I really liked it. And then that's how I kind of did this transition into like being more of a handler. What does like that look like in the world? Well, there's community handlers, which is like people who because puppy headspace requires like a lot of protections. Like I just did a video on this recently where I'm like, it's not like like someone asked me this weekend, like, oh, like what's the deepest kind of headspace and how intensive can a dynamic be in pet play? And they were talking about total power exchange. And I was like, I cannot recommend for a puppy or a pet to be in total power exchange kind of dynamics as a puppy or a pet. It's because if you're a submissive, you're still a human. You can still do human things and live your
Mm.
life within a dynamic. If you're a puppy or a critter, you cannot. You have to concern yourself with things like, yeah, you can't eat dog food. You can't use things that animals use. You can't be on your knees all the time. You will have terrible that will harm you physically over a long period of time. Your body cannot sleep in a crate every single night continuously without having some physical fatigue. You cannot, as a dog, do your taxes, or etc. And so there's a certain kind of care that has to be given for the headspace to be maintained in a healthy and secure way. So community handlers kind of do that at social events, like out and about. Like you'll see people at moshes, just making sure that puppies are like in headspace, having a good time, not harming themselves, being respectful to each other. Because it's also a primal headspace for a lot of people. And so they're not really, if they're like in a deep headspace, a lot of puppies I work with are like this. They're not thinking about you over there. They just want to play and have fun. And so there needs to be someone to kind of like put the boundaries up and make it happen. As a trainer, and where I feel like the training as a title and a trainer title, for me, that's a more intimate kind of play where I'm literally training a pup to kind of be the best version of themselves, but also in an image that I reflect, or it's a collaborative kind of process of what kind of kinkster do they want to be and how can I develop them to be that kinkster. So it's very similar for me in like Dom sub dynamics, and a lot of other kink kind of plays into it for me. Not everyone, but that's kind of how I frame that. And so as a title holder, it's kind of like a relational title to a critter of some sort. Like, and I think it's very small and there's not a lot of titles like this, partially because a lot of people who are handlers don't really use that identity. They're often Leathermen, and they'll have pups or subs who are interested in pup play or another kind of critter play. But they just identify as a Leatherman. They're like, I don't need to say I'm a handler or whatever else there is. But there is a lot of people who do not gravitate towards leather or gravitate to old guard dynamics or protocols at all. And they still want to be handlers and they still want to be trainers. And so I think that's really what the community, the core of the community, I would say, but it reflects anyone who's interested in that kind of specific kink power dynamic play.
That's really cool. You just taught me a couple of things I didn't know actually, because I started out as a pup,
Mhm.
and I have a maybe pup on the horizon where I would be the handler, and they're really deep into it. Where all of a sudden I'm just like, oh, I used to be a handler, but not that advanced. Okay, now I need to learn. I need to learn something as well, which is really cool. And that's the thing. It's like you don't ever stop learning about stuff. I also like when I explain my pup experience was with a handler. It was
Mhm.
never the pack thing. That was never a part of me. And when I did pup play back in black and white times, I was almost the only one I knew of besides the person I was doing it with. It was before it became mainstream almost. So I had to explain it to people. It's like, what does that entail? Why would you do that? And now it's just exploded to this huge thing where it's packs and social communities, and I see a lot of good in it. But for me, it's not necessarily my version of pop play, what I would like as my pop persona Rocco to be in. That's not for me. But I also see how great it is for a lot of people. So I'm still learning. You just taught me something on this podcast, which is great. This is what I wanted. Thank you for explaining all that. That was absolutely great. So talking about your addictions,
Mhm.
when did your addiction start, and when did you get to a point where this needs to stop?
Yeah. I'm gonna try not go from I was born.
Like with
Yeah.
anything, there's just like there is these markers that
Yeah, of course.
define us. So
Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. I mean, the big, I talked earlier about fantasy and isolation, like responding to isolation very early in my childhood, kind of having that experience. I remember the first time I drank was with some friends of mine. I was probably about 11 or 12, maybe at the time. And we like scored a porn. And it was like, VHS. And we like, had to go to like a friend's brother had it. And like we all went and got it, put it in a backpack. Like it just felt very covert. And it was our first experience with watching, like consuming any kind of sexual content. And it was my straight male friends, at the time. And we were all watching this porn at my friend's house, which was straight. My friend's mom had like a bunch of like beer, like this terrible beer. It'd been there forever, like that, like her boss made, like homemade or something like that. And they were like, "Oh well, why don't we have a beer and like watch, this thing and pretend like we're like real men." The entire time, I was looking at the guy in the porn, and I was so fearful the entire. I'm like, they know I've been seen, you know, and that turned from one beer, like we all have one beer except for me. I had multiple, and at that moment, I was like, this is a solution, and it totally pulled me out of myself, and I could like not care that I might be found out. I could pretend and do something else.
Hmm.
And I was off to the races, as they would say at that point. I drank heavily throughout my teen years. I was going to bars way before I should have. I didn't do drugs though. I was very anti-drug, partially because I saw my mother drink a lot and do a lot of prescription drugs
Hmm.
and I felt like she was so unhinged in my childhood that I was like, that the problem isn't that someone has a vice, it's that they're kind of doing too many things and it's mixing all the things.
Yeah, yeah.
So mine was alcohol, and I said I'm gonna do that, and that's it. I didn't even smoke pot until my 20s. So I went on, I wrecked cars, I drove off the road, I'd fall asleep. Anything you can do when drunk and tell you that you probably have a problem happened. But I didn't, I was just like, whatever, it doesn't matter. Cut to my 20s, I migrated to New York. It was a very complicated situation. I'm from the Bahamas and I wanted out. I felt very unsafe there as a queer person, especially someone who's very vocal. And I met a guy. We developed a relationship. I found legal status in the US. He offered to get married after a while, which we did. And it's so clear in hindsight, but I was really curious about substances at this point, because I'd seen all these people, I'd watched a lot of porn, like Treasure Island Media stuff. I was like obsessed with, like when it was in the like that's the point I grew up on. Yeah, interestingly, the my ex-husband, we agreed to get married. I proposed. We decided to get married later, like a few months from that point. And maybe like a few days after, I flew to Switzerland because I had work to do. And I used crystal for the first time, like immediately after. And I now see it as a clear, like I felt trapped. I felt like I had to go through this marriage. I had to do this stuff that I didn't want to do. And the first time I did it, I was like, I'm home. Like it felt like
Mm.
I felt like I was being bathed in Christ's blood, however graphic that imagery is, but like that kind of like purifying sense of whatever is how it felt. And I said, oh boy, um, I'm only going to do this in Switzerland like when I'm here because I go in every summer. I'm like immediately it was like putting up all these barriers,
Mm.
sign. But within 6 months, I was using intravenously, using not every day, but almost every day. My life started to be affected. My work, I started to not show up. Things started to kind of fall apart. And during that time, it took me another 4 years after that to actually stop using. And I picked up a whole bunch of other substances along the way, but crystal was always kind of like my primary drug of choice if one wants to lean that way. It was the day before I got sober, I tried to stop myself a lot. And I tried marijuana maintenance. I was spending a fortune on how much I was smoking to just keep to stay normal. But I felt like, well, if I'm not doing meth, then it's okay. Like, like I'm okay.
Mm.
And but I realized that none of the other systems worked. Like I was still me and I was still doing the same behavior. Yes, my life wasn't falling apart as terribly, but the depression was severe.
Yeah.
I was suicidal. And the moment for me, I think no matter what, how much someone uses or not, there was a moment when I felt like it's a childhood memory I connected to where I felt untethered, where I felt like my last little rope to like what I could trust or believe about myself was broken. And then I was just floating. And at that point, I was like, any decision, the smallest decision, opening up and answering an email for someone asking me something about work became, I don't know, should I do this? Should I do, like, I had no trust whatsoever. And I just felt like I was floating in space and it was terrifying. It's such a terrifying place to be. So going back to the day before I got sober, I was still with who's now my ex-husband, and I went on a binge and I was gone for like a couple of days and I saw like I don't know 13 missed calls, and he had these voice messages saying like, hey, I know what you're doing, just talk to me and let's figure this out, to eventually like the messages being like, I can't do this anymore, like consider this relationship over. And I called him and was like, oh no, I'm not doing that. And what happened was I got a new phone and my old phone and my new phone were sharing the same SIM number, and my old phone was at home charging with him. And I had my new phone, but everything was being duplicated on both phones. So he literally had a live screen showing everything that I was messaging or doing. So he knew everything. And he was like, I know what you're doing. And the only tool I had was I just denied it. I never admitted it to him. I was just like, no, no. And it hit me after I got off the phone with him that I had no tools, that all I knew how to do was lie. And and my response was I got off the phone and I just continued using. And I was like, I just got to avoid this as long as I possibly can. And that moment, I went straight the following day. I had a therapy session that I was late to, and I showed up tweaking out of my mind. And my therapist was like, this is a problem. Like, this has kind of gotten a little too far. I didn't know what to do. And a friend just reached out and was like, would you be willing to try something new? And I was like, I'm willing to do anything. And he took me to my first meeting, and it's worked since then. So that is like my story in a nutshell, I guess. It has not been easy for me. I've definitely still glorify certain aspects of that life. And for me going to Darklands, was something I was very nervous about. There was a lot of substance use I was present to and around that made me uncomfortable. And so it's just like something that's always present for me.
Yeah, I've had discussions with, and this is not me criticizing Darklands at
Oh,
all, because it's
great.
an amazing event, and they do 12-step meetings now every day whilst you're there, and I think it's an amazing event, and you have the day stuff as well, which is so good. The circuit parties at night time is definitely not where I thrive, that's for sure. And I'm definitely not here to yuck someone's yum if they want to go and do ecstasy and whatever. I'm a firm believer in harm reduction, like yourself. So it's just about giving people tools when they're ready to stop. But yeah, thank you for sharing that because there's so much. I definitely relate to a lot of it because a lot of my is escapism. You mentioned like as a child you would escape into worlds. Mine was reading. It's like books because I couldn't relate to the other kids at all. I was popular with the girls because I was slightly effeminate, and the boys didn't quite know what to do with me because I didn't like football. I didn't do all the normal boy things. So books were definitely my sanctuary, and I still do today. Is like I can talk about, oh, this happened to me, but I don't connect to the emotions around it. I'm very good at disconnecting from it. If I allow myself to feel it, I'll get upset, but I'm very good at talking about stuff very matter of fact. And you can almost like when I'm talking about trauma to someone and they haven't experienced trauma, and I can just see the horror on their face, and it's like, oh no, I'm fine. But they expecting like when you're telling stories like that, there needs to be an emotional reaction, but I don't have one. I can do, but that's a whole other conversation I need to have with a therapist, really. But so I relate to a lot of the stuff you talk about. It's familiar, but not 100% the same. And I'm glad you are where you're at now, because we need more people like you on the community, and it's so important, especially in settings as a fetish party, because on occasion you will have someone who comes up to me and it's like, uh, also to me it's like, actually I'm not ready to stop yet, but I listen to your stuff, and it's
Mhm.
like, great, keep doing that. Eventually you'll get it, and that's fine. Until you get it, here's some outlets you can go to that will teach you not to end up killing yourself along the way.
Absolutely. Like that's unfortunately, whenever people know I'm sober, people who use tend to like run with the opposite direction. But I align with that so deeply. Like even when I play with people, like
Mm.
I'm kind of more vanilla play. Like I don't really engage in like any kind of kink practice with someone who's high or
No, no,
using.
no, no.
It's a little dangerous for me and for them. The like I'm not here to judge you. I don't care. That's your journey. Like I have some regular play buddies, that we do vanilla stuff and they use substances and I'm like, cool, well, you do what you do, I'm not gonna judge you for it. I'm also not gonna put myself in harm's way. And if you ever want to talk to me seriously about this, I can switch gears, and I have a whole like the sexual components end immediately for me. Like if I'm here to help you get sober, like this is the relationship has changed,
Yeah.
and I put on my little recovery cap and I'll put you in connection with the people you need and take you to meetings or do whatever is capable. But until then, it's about just getting resources. I heard someone say once that like you need to be alive to get sober, like
That does
and
help, yes.
yeah. So I want people, and people's journey don't have to be my journey. Like what I want is not what they want, and that's fine. Like there are lots of people I know who like a marijuana maintenance program works for them, like
Hmm.
not everyone like what is living to the height of like talking about clarity, like if we're attempting some kind of like version of enlightenment or something through this, everyone's on their own journey with that and it's comfortable. Some people might never achieve something that someone else might, but they might also not want it, so who am I to say?
I talk to a lot of people. I think a lot of people get hung up when they are in early recovery, the concept of giving up drink, which is a big one. I was very angry about it because my problem is not necessarily the drink, it's what I do when I drink. That's the problem for me, and that's why I don't drink now. I've now had a couple of friends where they've started in recovery, they weren't quite ready to give up the drink. I pointed out a couple of things to them, not necessarily telling them what to do, just like, but have you thought about these things and how this might affect you? And now they're giving 100% sobriety a go, and a lot of them are like, "Oh, this is actually quite nice." And this is the thing. It's a process. It's not a linear journey. And if this person went back to having a drink occasionally, I'm not there to judge them on it. It's more, I will be there if it becomes an issue. If you need to talk, if you need to give this up again, I will also be there to support you. I'm not there to judge anyone's journey. And it's also like a lot of, I find sometimes some recovery people, not everyone, wring their nose at California sober. But I'm also like, yeah, but they're not in the gutter with a needle in their arm.
I'm so aligned, and that's actually something I've even struggled with recently with certain types of recovery spaces or perspectives can be very dogmatic, and I just don't find that help. Like I know it helps some people, like they need that kind of like rigidity.
Hmm.
And it helped me at first a lot. I was like, I'm gonna be the best, whatever sober person I can be. And I was overachiever before and after. My relationship to that is actually like I've been like struggling a bit over the past year and a half, maybe even longer, to like what does recovery look like for me? Not
Hmm.
like what someone else is telling me, not what a sponsor's telling me, not what a program's telling me. Like, what does this really mean? Where are my boundaries within this process? What do
Yeah.
all these terms mean in a vernacular that I deeply understand and resonate with? And I'm really turned off when people are very rigid with what the experience is. Like you're saying, like, I mean, I know people who don't have more than 6 months of recovery in any continuous time, but they've been that way for 10 years. So I'm like, so in the past 10 years, you've drank on 20 days of the past 10 years. I consider that a win. Like, like a huge win and something that shouldn't be underestimated. Yeah. So I really, if there's a message of like anyone who's following me or cares to connect in any kind of way around recovery, it's like you're welcome to come talk. You're welcome to be like, I am not gonna throw you out. I'm not gonna judge you. I'm not gonna like I don't care about all the kind of pleasantries around that experience. Like it's just too painful of an experience to let people just like float around out there if they want the help. And whatever that looks like is like completely fine. Um,
I Nat, that's something you said earlier. You talked about crystal meth use and how it helped you explore like pace play and impact play and stuff like that. How, when you became sober, how did you do those kind of things without the chemsex element? Because it took me a while to disconnect it.
Yeah, well, some of it never came back.
Okay.
What came
Yeah.
back differently, like fisting is a good example. I have
Mm.
not had fisting bottom since I got sober.
Same.
Uh, I've been open enough to be, but it's actually the trust component I find
Mm.
really hard to get over. And I know that there are lots of fisters I know, like I work at fisting party. It's like but there is something there that's still unresolved for me that kind of dominating more, topping more, kind of like made it less of a priority along the way. It's just something that never came back. And I remember attempting in like maybe 2 or 3 years into recovery to be a fisting bottom again. And anytime someone got like close, they could use a huge toy on me that like so it wasn't a size problem, but like I would just kind of panic a little bit.
Mm.
And I just was never able to get over that. And I think a part of it is because the first time I was fisted, I didn't know I was being fisted. Like I was someone's behind me doing stuff, and the next thing it's just like plop, and it's just like, oh, and I was bleeding, and you know what I mean? Like it was, but I was so high to my mind, I didn't feel really anything. It was whatever. And I just let people do whatever they wanted to me for a long time in that state. And so like that kind of intimacy I'm still working through. The more empowered I became around educating myself on the different kink practice and the community, like knowing that there's sober people there, that there, I in my head there was no one. doing it when I was using. But when I got sober and actually saw like, oh my God, there's like a lot of sober guys who are kinky as hell. And it started to make me feel comfortable. And like I
Mm.
remember my first really intense impact scene was with another sober person who I knew from meetings. And so I decided to connect. Like even the parties I throw or go to, like there's a lot of sober people. It makes me feel very comfortable. I had the unfortunate experience 2 years sober that someone pissed in me at a bathhouse who was high, and I it was probably one of the hardest moments of my recovery, but I didn't pick up, but it was extremely challenging. And for me, kink is like sexuality and identity and kink are so integral to like who I am as a person that it was never an option for me to not do it. Like I just felt like, and this is partially something I can work through even deeper. Sex has always been a place of power for me, even when I was much younger. And though it was unhealthy, but you tapped into something like all of these are tools that did something for me, right? At some point, like, I needed them in some way. Like if I never found drinking or I never found crystal, I think that I would still be that child that's like really afraid and insecure and not having experiences and doing that stuff. So it served its purpose
Mm.
and but it was maladapted for sure. So I'm grateful to them for saving me. I really believe alcohol saved me when I was a teenager. And yeah, it's one of the reasons I started coaching that led into me doing the video work I do now is because I see so many of my peers struggle with sexuality in
Mm.
recovery. And I, for whatever reason of my own story, I've never had shame around it. Everyone has shame. I've had shame, but to the degree that I see other people, like
Yeah.
I never struggled. Like my first meeting, I was just like, blah, 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 water's west, whatever. Like, people knew I'd just say the craziest shit on my mind. So it was never hidden from me. Again, going back to that theme of like integration, like for me, like it's all about integration. And so I see people struggle who are like, this is my play life and this is like who I am at work and this is my family life and member life. And for me, it was about getting rid of those boundaries and just like mix them all together. Bring your play life to your recovery life to your whatever, like just bring them together at all times. And then for me, it created a sense of safety, that I wasn't hiding anything from the other internally, which is important, but also within the life I lived. And that just made it so much more possible to live a more expressed, think forward life within recovery.
That's amazing because one of the things I struggled with in early recovery was being constantly told I had to give up this part of my life because it was so entwined with drug taking. And it was, and I did have breaks, and the only time I did do kink was when I was relapsing. So there was a pattern for sure, but I'm also quite stubborn, and I knew kink was a part of my life before drug taking. It was always a part of me. I can remember being kinky before I even knew what kink was.
Mhm.
So it was such an integral part of me, and I just had this craving of getting it back. But unfortunately, here in Europe, we don't have a big kink sobriety scene. It's a lot better now, and I'm so happy there are channels where we can explore all these things and we can talk about them openly. And I think that's so important, especially on the kink scene. I feel like we have a responsibility because it is so prevalent. And a lot of people's like, oh, it's not that bad. It's like, it is. It is that bad. It's because you don't see it. Also, I'm like a fucking bloody sniffer dog at a party. I will spot them like this. And everyone's like, oh, I just thought they were drunk or a little bit chatty. It's like, no, they're rolling their eyes out. And I'll spot them now. And now that I get offered drugs, it's like, where were you 10 years ago when I couldn't find them?
Exactly.
But we're coming to the end of the episode. If anyone's watched or listened to something you've said and they really connected with you, where can they get a hold of you?
My Instagram, my TikTok, my email, it's all follow chipper, either at follow chipper or my email is followchipper@gmail.com.
Fantastic. And what is your favorite piece of gear?
I have to pick one.
It's like
Uh,
picking a favorite child, isn't it?
it is. And you too. And I'll say why. Probably my favorite piece is my mirror cap, which I've not been wearing at this moment, but I have it right here. My pack got me that about 3 years ago, and we did a covering. And it was just like really meaningful to me. And so it's a piece of like I have other mirror caps, but it's like the one I go to. It signifies something really special for me. It's very personal. It was also the moment when I was transitioning to be more of a handler and a Leatherman. And so to be like witnessed and seen and surprised with it was just like really beautiful and meaningful. And it gave me permission, you know, in a new way. And the other item, which I know you said one, but I'm cheating, is bondage mittens. I love like puppies like to focus on hoods a lot, I feel. And for me, the hood is great, like to see oneself in a new way. The kind of sensory deprivation it can provide is good, but removing thumbs and having to use paws, like when you that's all you have, for me is such an effective headspace tool. And even pups who use like the ones like from Mr. S or something where you have use of your fingers, the first time they go into like a bondage mitten, I can see the like, oh, you know, over them. And I love that. It's like it's like my favorite tool to use with like new people to the scene or people who are exploring their kind of puppy headspace.
Do you know what? That makes me smile so much because I was never a pup with a pup hood. I
Yeah.
was mitts,
Yeah.
and I have mitts. So this like you just speaking my language. It's ridiculous. It's so thank you very much. That's great. And just to end the episode, is there a piece of advice you would like to give to someone?
A singular piece. Wherever you are in your journey is where you need to be. Be gentle on yourself, forgive your younger self, go where the love is. We're too hard on ourselves, you know, like
Mm,
I am to me, I am to other people. Like it's just we're just animals running around trying to figure it out and doing our best. You know, I really believe that. And I don't think we tell ourselves enough. Like my go-to phrase is always like be gentle on yourself. Like this is where you're at right now is what it is. The forgiving my younger self is hard because that can include
mm.
5 minutes ago as my younger self. So I have to like let go of anything I said during this interview that I'm like, or this conversation, you know. And going with the love is has always led me the right way.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Chibber. It's been an absolute joy to talk to you.
Thank you so much. It's been wonderful.
And that was this week's episode talking with Chipper. It's been absolutely joy to listening to his stories. There's so much recognition, and I'm a little bit like, oh my God, he's like the American version of me because there's so many similarities in certain things we've done. It's crazy. So I'll be back in 2 weeks' time and go out, be kinky, get your pop mitts on and go out and have some fun. And because sober is sexy, and go out and have some fun. Bye.